This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Welcome to Killer Innovations. I'm your host, Phil McKinney. We are here in the studio for another episode. We have been out and traveling, looking for and talking with innovators in non-obvious industries and non-obvious locations. We've definitely been on and about the beaten path and have actually had some great conversations with some innovators, so stay tuned. Those will be part of future shows. For those of you who have been longtime listeners of the show, reflect back on a series of conversations that we recorded from the Consumer Electronics Show this year, talking about future technology trends, what's coming, and how does that apply in people's day-to-day, both personal lives, but also in the work world. And one of the topics that was really hot at this year's CES, and it continues to be hot, is around AI, artificial intelligence. And the question of, is it real? Is it overhyped? How does that really play itself out? So today we have a special guest, Jeetu Patel. He's the Chief Product Officer at Box. Now, I'm pretty sure if you've been a listener to this show, you know what Box is in the company. And in fact, this entire radio show, I'm going to say for the last 8 years, completely operates and runs off of Box. The teams around the world would not be able to do what they do without our Box accounts. So, but the question that came up was when Jeetu's name got on our radar screen, was talking about the thoughts about AI and how does it play into products and product strategies, et cetera. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Jeetu, thank you for joining, taking time out of your calendar to come join us here at Killer Innovations.
Thank you for having me, Phil. And I didn't know about your 8-year loyalty, so thank you for being a loyal customer of Box.
Yeah, well, and as you and I were talking before we started the show, early days of Box, while I was CTO at HP, we were so impressed with the technology that we actually pre-installed it. So it was 40 laptops a year got Box pre-installed because we thought that move to the cloud and the ability to share and collaborate on those kinds of things. And in fact, another thing, I don't think I've shared this with anybody. When I was writing my book, Beyond the Obvious, my publisher is Hackett, New York. My editor was in Los Angeles. The fact checkers were in Virginia, and we did my entire book on Box. So that's how my book was written. Was all in and was using the Box application.
This just became my favorite podcast.
There's one way, right? So, Jeetu, the question, look, before we hop in, because this is a topic that I get passionate about, right? It's around innovations that are real versus innovations that are fluff, right? And there's a lot of innovations out there that are fluff. But before we get into that conversation, give us a little bit of background on yourself. You've been at Box for a little bit of time, but you've been around a little bit. Give us some background.
Yeah, I am old. It's unfortunate, but I started my career, in Chicago, working for a strategic consultancy that was partly owned by Forrester, helping CIOs and Fortune 500 companies basically make decisions that are strategic technology decisions around how they can more effectively, collaborate with content and, fundamentally change culture with having a more open kind of content management and collaboration kind of fabric within the organization. So that's what I had done for a large percentage of my earlier years in my career. And then at some point in time, EMC tapped me to see if I'd want to be their CTO and help them with the cloud and mobile side of the business with their Documentum and the software properties. So I did that, joined them very quickly, realized that organically it'll be pretty hard to do anything over there that was innovative. So, went to the board and said we probably need to have some kind of, infusion of some acquisition so that we can bring in some outside blood. We made an acquisition of a company called Simplicity, which at the time was a competitor to Box. I was CEO of that company for about 3 years or so, and then we scaled that business very rapidly. And then when Dell was buying EMC, they wanted to they carved out that asset and sold it to private equity. I knew Aaron Levy at the time, and we were having dinner one night, and he said, "Well, why don't you come over here and incubate a platform business for us?" So that's how I came to Box. And that's how I found my way into Box. And it's been here for 3 years, and I'd say that it's been a ride of a life. It's been a ride of a lifetime, and I've had a great time so far.
Well, what's been interesting, you talk about simplicity, and back in the early days in this space, you had SugarSync, and it was a pretty crowded field for a long time.
Exactly.
I think everybody kind of got on the bandwagon that says he who gets trusted with the data becomes very sticky. It becomes hard to split it out. But if you think about whether it's simplicity, SugarSync was more consumerish. At least that's my opinion. Or Box, it really feeds into this, this whole digital transformation, right? The future of work. In my case, when I was writing my book, or here, with my radio show, I've got staff in Asia, I've got staff in Europe, all working on the radio show stuff. And the fact that everybody can collaborate. What's kind of your thinking around this whole digital transformation? Because a lot of people think, okay, particularly with Box and those kinds of companies, it's just a straight sync thing, and that's all. That's what it's used for. But it's much more than that, given what corporations are looking for. Correct?
Yeah, I mean, in fact, we think of the core problem that we solve is in this whole kind of realm of digital transformation itself. So if you think about Box, we describe ourselves as a cloud content management company rather than just syncing of files. That was something that we started the business with, but we've actually grown far, far more from there. So, companies like GE and Coca-Cola and Procter & Gamble and Eli Lilly and 85,000 customers and 69% of the Fortune 500 tend to use us for very sophisticated processes within their business that they rely on us for. But I think it all comes down to one thing, which is there's going to be two kinds of companies in the world. There are going to be companies whose business models will get disrupted by others, and there'll be companies who will go out and disrupt other people's business models. Those are the only two kind of categories I think that'll exist. And this whole notion of digital transformation is pretty real. Most companies are going to be tech companies as they move forward. And the way we think about it is there are two major problem areas that companies are going to face as they go transform digitally. The first one is they need to have a digital workplace, which is their employees and their internal kind of stakeholders need to have the right kind of system so they can more effectively collaborate with each other and share content and, make sure that they can access it from anywhere, anytime, so on and so forth, and do it securely. And then the second one is they as a company need to operate like a digital company. It's not just that they can go and slap an app at the top and then everything becomes digital. They have to fundamentally think like a digital company. Their business model is going to evolve. The half-life of the company's business models is shrinking quite dramatically. Like every 7 years, your business model tends to change quite dramatically. If you look at a company like Netflix, they started with just rentals of DVDs, and then they went into making sure that you can stream media, and now they're building original content. And every wave of that business model killed the previous wave for them. Mm-hmm. And so for any company that's going to thrive and survive over the course of the next decade or two is going to need to think in a more agile way as they evolve their business. And we always joke around internally, if you show me your IT stack, I can tell you your culture, because there's a direct correlation between what kind of IT stack you have and how open and transparent you're going to be and what kind of incentives people have and how are they going to go out and be inclusive. All of these things are going to go back to, if you have a legacy IT stack that hoards information, you just will have a cultural implication of that where you want to attract the best talent. So we think like digital transformation is at the pretty core of what we try to go out and help companies do. And the way that we do it is by providing a world-class digital workplace, set of technologies so they can have a great workplace, providing the tools and technologies and fabrics so that they can be a great digital business, and do that all with the right level of cybersecurity and data protection, privacy, compliance, so that they feel comfortable as they're moving their one of the most critical assets to the cloud, which is their content.
Yeah, I mean, I think you bring up an interesting point, right? I love the fact of you think about the IT. I started, back in the mid '90s. I was the founder and CIO for a company called Telligent, right? Telecom company with no legacy. And I jokingly say the first day you go live and you enter your first bill, you have legacy. And dealing and just not having the ability to have the flexibility. We're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we're going to pick up and continue our conversation with Jeetu Patel, Chief Product Officer at Box, and continuing our conversation about digital transformation, but also the role of some new innovations that can be applied in this space. So don't go anywhere. You're listening to Killer Innovations on the BizTalk Radio Network. Welcome back to Killer Innovations. We're continuing our conversation with Jeetu Patel, from Chief Product Officer at Box. We did a little bit of a love fest at the beginning of the last segment, given how many years of Box that I use, and I don't think I could ever. I don't think I could go anywhere that doesn't have Box as a productivity tool. It's absolutely indispensable. But Jeetu, we talked before in the earlier segment about digital transformation, but one of the topics I want to get into, and I know you spent a lot of time thinking about this, is really how do you bring unique and different innovations into these kinds of products? And the one that, that gets, everybody out there is touting, quote, AI in their products. And sometimes it infuriates me because I think people are just fluffing it, from the standpoint of claiming AI versus really AI. And when you think about Box and you try to think about innovation, how do you mesh those two together, given kind of the historical view, right? I've got a little bit of insight on Box. I'm not completely up to date, but when I think about Box and AI, it kind of causes me to scratch my head a little bit, like, where does this fit in?
Yeah, and so the way we think about, major kind of mega trends in technology, we always think of them, and we think we've had three within our lifetime over here, which have been pretty instructive to our evolution. The first one was in the cloud, as people moved to the cloud. The second one was the mobile revolution, where you had multiple devices that people wanted to access content from, and then the third one is AI. And if you think about the core thesis of what we try to do is, when you find these megatrends, make sure that you don't try to fight them and use them as a tailwind that propels your business forward. And we think AI is one of those. Now, is AI overhyped? I think in the short term, people are overestimating the impact that AI has, and in the long term, people will underestimate probably the impact that they have, like they always say with technology. So,
well, that's exactly right, because the human nature is you will underestimate or overestimate in the near term, underestimate in the long term, and that's where companies totally flub the transition from one trend to the next.
That's right. And the way we think about AI is actually, we always start from the customer problem rather than starting from technology, but we do keep a very close eye on what are the structural shifts that are going to fundamentally change the universe of computing in a pretty meaningful way and refactor things. And we think AI is one of those technologies. And if you, our motivation over here is, we just want to make sure that when a customer, when we have the privilege to have Box as the custodian of content for our customers, that a piece of content put into Box should be infinitely more valuable for that customer than that same piece of content was outside of Box. And the way we can do that is by bringing services and innovations that are happening around the world to the content that's in Box. And one of those innovations is around artificial intelligence. So we have a couple different initiatives going on with AI. The first one is around this whole notion of what we launched last year called Box Skills, where if you just think about the experience that people have with their content, our content's doubling every 12 to 14 months, by the way. So we've had this exponential growth of content. And as one of the things that's really counterintuitive about this industry is the more content that gets into a system and the more you use a content management system, the harder it gets to use, which is not how the world should operate. Like, it should get easier the more you use something, but in content management, because you've got this kind of explosion of content, it just gets harder to find information. It gets harder to go out and do anything that's productive in the system because there's a complexity that starts to compound. And so what we want to do is attack that problem and say, wouldn't it be nice if we could add intelligence around content in a very automated manner. And we saw that there was tens of billions of dollars being spent by some of the major providers in the market in artificial intelligence. And rather than going out and saying, we're going to have our own AI models that we're going to spend most of our time building, we said, why don't we just bring those AI models to our content? So we struck partnerships with Microsoft, with Google, with IBM Watson, with Amazon, with others, to say, let's make sure that we can actually provide a mechanism that if we have content in Box, an image file, a video file, an audio file, how do you bring these machine learning algorithms and models to Box so that you can say things like, I'm going to automatically detect across your 10 million images you have in your digital asset management repository what the objects are within each image, so that I can automatically do a search around those in a far more effective way. Show me all the images I have for a campaign, which actually have a tennis ball, a tennis racket, and a female playing tennis with New Balance shoes. And then it'll show me the 5 images out of my 10 million, corpus. And I didn't have to go out and manually tag that. If I have a video, like this podcast that we're running right now, we might have multiple different topics we talk about in the podcast. I just want to see the specific topic where we're talking about machine learning. And wouldn't it be nice if I could have one facial recognition in every frame of the podcast, so it knows that when Phil is talking, I want to go to that segment of the podcast when Phil is talking. And I want to go to that segment specifically where he's talking about machine learning as a topic. And those kind of sophisticated tagging mechanisms, what we did was we used the machine learning models to apply to our content. And we think that will completely change the kind of experience people have with content over the course of the next 4 or 5 years than we have in the past 25 years. So, you'll be able to have very different kinds of experiences where you'll just ask a question and get an answer. You won't have to open up a document. You'll be able to look at a video non-linearly rather than from the beginning to the end. You'll be able to know exactly what the sentiment is of someone who's talking in an audio file. All those things completely change the use cases that organizations will be able to go out and take advantage of with these kind of systems.
So, but Jeetu, when I think about Box, I think it is the content piece, and I've got the AI piece. Are you actually running the AI models in your center versus just being a data source to somebody else's AI infrastructure?
So we have 2 different efforts going on in artificial intelligence. One is we've built this kind of framework where we can have the industry's artificial intelligence and machine learning models that have been built that can be applied to our content. And so we bring those APIs, we can actually take a video file and have it be processed with Microsoft, where there's frame by frame facial recognition, sentiment analysis, transcription, topic detection, those kind of things, so that if you happen to be a university that wants to record your videos, you'll be able to have a very different way that the viewing experience can be enhanced. That's one area that we're doing work where we would actually partner up with the others. And then the second area is we have this kind of technology called Box Graph, where we have the underlying framework for machine learning, where we deeply understand the relationship between 2 pieces of content or content and people or people and people, and then can go out and provide sophisticated recommendations in the areas of productivity or security or compliance or workflow. So those are the 2 efforts that are going on. The first one, we partner with someone. With the second one, we've actually built our own.
Perfect. And that's an interesting model, because I think everybody's still trying to figure out what the model looks like, right? Because AI machine learning data becomes the gold, right? And wherever that data sets. So we're going to take another quick commercial break. When we come back, we're going to continue on our conversation with Jeetu Patel, Chief Product Officer at Box. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to Killer Innovations. Welcome back to Killer Innovations. I'm your host, Phil McKinney. We are continuing our conversation with Jeetu Patel, Chief Product Officer at Box, talking specifically about the different models that Box has been looking at around their AI, whether it's a partnering or having their own systems. But the key for any AI system is really around the access to the data. And so, Jeetu, let's continue the conversation on these 2 different models that you've have been working with at Box around AI. Are there specific application types that make sense for this, or is this pretty much anything? This thing can be applied to anything and everything.
While it's pretty horizontal, we've seen some really interesting use cases come up in different segments. I can share with you a few of them. So, for example, I was talking earlier about universities. I mean, if you think about the way that the education kind of sector is changing, online courses tend to be a great supplement to the way the kind of knowledge you can get from a classroom. Either for the students that already go to a classroom or the people that were not able to go to the classroom but can still go out and learn from the things that were taught in the classroom. And, those course lectures being recorded. We have some customers now who are recording these course lectures and making sure that they're running them through our video machine learning skills. And before you know it, you now have the entire video, which is a 40-minute lecture, bookmarked by all the different topics. And if you have 5 or 6 different speakers in there, you know exactly at what frames, at what segments of the lecture, which speakers are going to be speaking and what the transcript looks like. And that actually gives you a mechanism to say, I only wanted to go out and spend 10 minutes on this lecture rather than 40. I can actually spend the best 10 minutes rather than randomly fast forwarding. That's one great example. If you look at simplified digital asset management, like I was talking about earlier as well, where a marketing team might want to have a campaign that they run and they don't want to they want to utilize the assets that they have from a digital standpoint, but they don't have an easy way to go out and tag those assets, and it's a very manual exercise. Now you can actually make sure that with object detection, you can use a machine learning algorithm to just go out and tag 10 million images, and before you know it, your discovery gets a whole lot easier. And so, those kind of examples the one last one is around this whole notion of how do you train at scale, a call center or inside sales teams? And like we are able to go out and we have a skill for audio where you could literally not only transcribe what's happening in a talk in an audio file, but you can also determine what the sentiment is based on what's being talked about. And so you can literally train your inside sales reps by saying, well, when you go out and bring up these kind of promotional offers, customers have gotten frustrated. And when these other promotional offers have been brought up, customers have actually felt pretty elated and happy. So you can do that at scale because you can now, rather than just doing spot treatment of going and training 1 or 2 people, by actually sitting on a physical call with them, you can listen to all the 500 calls they made and look at the data on how many times they frustrated a customer and how many times they got a customer really excited. So it fundamentally changes at scale how you can operate with these technologies.
Yeah, it's interesting from the standpoint. My opinion is that we're still in the very early days of AI. It's one of those things we've been talking about for 25 years, and we think of it as an overnight thing, but it's been around for quite some time. But I think we're on the verge, at least my view is we're on this verge where the use of AI, particularly around machine learning, is starting to get some really interesting traction, like in the use cases you mentioned. Mm-hmm. I'd be interested in getting your thoughts about, how is this technology really going to revolutionize? What should companies be thinking about when they think about AI and machine learning as far as, because the digital transformation has been pretty disruptive, as we talked about earlier in the show, about you could tell a company's culture by, their legacy piece. We're going to go through this kind of another generation of digital transformation when it comes to applying AI machine learning to it, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have 2 thoughts. One, which is a positive one, and we're very optimistic view. And the second one, where I actually feel like there's some responsibility that all of us in the tech community share. So the positive piece on AI is I think there's a lot of potential to automate at scale the things that humans aren't necessarily that good at doing that machines can do better. And so, and AI is more meaningful at scale than it is in small doses. So it's when you have 1 million video files that you want to go out and automatically tag, that's far more interesting than a single video file that needs to be tagged. However, I will say this one thing. I think Silicon Valley in the past has historically always kind of oversimplified disruptions. And I think you can see some of this even as a result of like what's happened in some parts of the country where people have had a really hard time, where, we always say that technology and disruptions are net positive because it actually creates more jobs than it actually erodes. And the reality is the jobs it creates aren't for the same people whose jobs it eroded. Mm-hmm. And we as a tech community have to bear some of the responsibility of retraining people, because when you when you disrupt a coal miner's job, that person is not going to be your next, kind of Python programmer. And so you have to make sure that as a society, when we disrupt industries, we are actually taking that. These are people's lives and their families that get impacted. And if you have someone in the late 40s or early 50s who gets disrupted from an industry, and if we don't have a mechanism societally for retraining them, you actually, there's a creation of a very, very poor lifestyle for the last decade or last 2 decades of their working life.
Well, you bring up an interesting point, because I lived, in south side of Chicago. I lived you're from Chicago. I grew up on 185th South on Halstead, right? Yeah. Where everybody in that end of the state, or that end of Chicago, all worked in the steel mills, right? Yeah. And now go to the 70s when the steel mills totally imploded. The information economy was emerging. You were not going to retrain my dad to be a programmer. That was not, or my father, or my father-in-law who worked at Jones and Laughlin Steel. You weren't going to change them.
And I feel like the tech industry has a far greater responsibility in societal retraining of talent and making sure that diversity and inclusion and all people get the equal opportunity than we've actually taken our fair share of our part in playing. So, well,
I give kudos to you, Jeetu, because this is something that I think the tech community, particularly Silicon Valley, has kind of stuck their head in the sand on. And given I have a mobile studio. I'm getting ready to head on the road. I'll be on the road for the next month or so. Again, I go out all the time. And I'm talking to innovators in like Paducah, Kentucky, and Huntsville, Alabama, New Orleans. And it is facing a very interesting piece. As we wrap up here on the show, the one thing I do want to talk about is at Box, introducing something like AI is interesting because it's one thing, but Box has been pretty darn good at having what I would call sustainable innovation, that constant investment. What's the secret at Box for how you continue to do that kind of sustainable innovation work?
Yeah, and the way we think about it is we try to get breakthrough 10x innovations on a repeatable basis at scale. And in my mind, the secret sauce of that is a couple things. One is, we really believe in small teams, not large teams. Mm-hmm. So we want to make sure that this whole idea that Jeff Bezos has of 2 pizza teams, we take that really seriously. Every team that we have is about 8 to 10 people in size. And when, as your company scales, you don't scale your teams. You just get many, many more teams. And that actually creates localized missions, atomic decision making, with the right level of, kind of emphasis on velocity and innovation. So that's one. The second one is scarcity is, your best friend at the point in time when you're incubating a product, because if you actually overinvest in something, most people spend most of the time spending the money rather than actually innovating. So having small teams with scarcity of resource, we found is one of the key kind of formulas for success that we've seen.
Yeah, perfect. I did a show, I don't know, it's probably 5 or 6 years ago, where I believe in constraint-based innovation. Never give them all the money they ask for, never give them all the people they want, and always cut the calendar back to force them to have to break the rules. Real quick, Jeetu, we've only got a couple seconds here. If people want to follow what you're up to and what Box is up to, where's the best place they can find you?
We'd love for you to come visit box.com, and there's a big event that we do every year, which is called BoxWorks on August 29th and 30th. If you happen to be in the Bay Area in Moscone Center, we'll be there, and we're going to have some great people from all walks of life and leadership and technology that are going to be coming there and speaking. So we'd love to have people join us there.
Perfect. We'll have all that information up on the show notes. So thanks a lot, Jeetu, for joining us. Don't go anywhere for the fourth segment. We've got a new 5 minutes to new ideas segment coming up right after this commercial break. So don't go anywhere. If you've got an idea for a guest for an upcoming show, drop me a note, phil@killerinnovations.com. And we'll be right back after this break. Back in the early days of this show, I would share what I called a killer question in each episode. These questions were designed to be used in your personal, team, or organization's innovation efforts. Now, based on feedback from listeners just like you, we've decided to bring it back with some improvements. Each episode of the Killer Innovations has a segment that I'm now calling 5 Minutes to New Ideas. It's designed for the creative mind looking for that next great idea. Each episode will challenge you to think differently about yourself, your business, and your products and services by asking unique, funny, and sometimes crazy questions. These questions are designed to force you to look beyond the obvious and to uncover ideas and opportunities you never before considered. So, get out your notebook and be ready to uncover that game-changing idea. Here is 5 minutes to new ideas. My wife is famous for being more than a little frugal. She once routed me and our son Logan from Las Vegas to Phoenix to LA and finally to San Jose because she could save $20 each over the nonstop fare. Kind of nuts, right? But if I'm honest, I have the same mindset in one respect. I am determined to squeeze everything I can out of any idea or opportunity that is available to me. I'm diligent about looking at information and ideas that supposedly, quote, had no value and wondering, hey, maybe they do have value. What I mean by this is simple. Just because you or your business has always operated under the assumption that something, be it data, ideas, or scraps from the manufacturing process, is essentially worthless, it doesn't mean that that assumption was ever or still is true. I constantly review the stuff that gets thrown away and ask myself, is there value here? One of my big breaks was becoming one of the early executives at Telligent in 1997. Telligent provided phone service to businesses across the United States and in 12 countries. The core product was voice and data services to business. There wasn't much to differentiate us from our competitors. Basically, we were all competing on the same fundamental premise, providing a good, reliable service at a cheaper price. Here's the problem with that. If there are no significant differences between you and your competitors, you are essentially in a stalemate until one of you finds a way to differentiate from the pack. So even as our company continued to hum along nicely, I started asking the questions about who we were, what we were doing, and how we were doing it. I started doing some internal investigating about the information we were gathering from our customers. After a little persistence, I got a hold of the complete call detail records for our network. In the telecom industry, the network throws away any record that is not relevant to billing. The result was that 70% of the information in call detail records was thrown away. A customer rang a business, the line was free, the call was answered, and a charge was added to the bill. Great, that's how we make money. But looking through the full call detail records, I noticed something interesting. The logs showed not only the calls that succeeded, but also the calls that failed. For each business, there were pages and pages of incoming calls that were not completed, usually because the line was busy or the calls were coming before or after business hours. This was information that was thrown away. We didn't bill for failed calls, so there was no need to document them or supply the information to the customer. But think about it. Surely knowing that a potential customer tried and failed to make contact with you is invaluable information. Furthermore, isn't it kind of information you would gladly pay for? As soon as I saw the connection between this worthless information and our customers' needs, I got up and walked over to our CEO, Alex Mandel's office, and quickly pitched him a completely new kind of service that we eventually launched as Imagine. Imagine was a game-changing concept that allowed us to take a leadership role in the market. For a monthly fee, we offered our customers detailed breakdowns of all incoming calls that failed to get through, as well as additional services like instantaneous email notifications of each missed call. We supplied the names and addresses of every incoming call, so a business owner could then send out a coupon to every caller the next day. Sounds simple? Think about the small or medium-sized business owner whose margins depend on making every single sale. If that new customer doesn't get through to you, they are simply going to ring the next number in the phone book. They have no loyalty to you, and you've lost a sale and a potential long-term customer. But if you get instant notification of that call and can ring back right away, you've got a fighting chance. You are still in the game. Our customers loved Imagine. By giving them the edge in their own business, we cemented their loyalty to ours. By taking something we had historically thought had no value and creating something our customers valued out of it, we turned it into a game changer. Look more closely at your operations and stop worrying about the assets or attributes that you think you don't have. Instead, try turning inward and focusing on the questions, what attributes do I not realize I have? Our competitors had all the exact same logs and information as we did, yet they didn't recognize their value. We saw this information had worth, and we used it to clobber them. Think it's a dumb idea? Zoos used to pay a small fortune to have manure hauled away. Then someone had the bright idea to package the manure and market it towards gardeners. Now gardeners buy gallons of elephant manure for up to $20 a pop, and they do the hauling for free. So ask yourself, what are you throwing away because you assume it has no value? Warning, it's easy to overlook what you think is garbage. As the old saying goes, one person's garbage is another man's treasure. I'm Phil McKinney, and thanks for listening. Thanks for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join in. If you have any comments or suggestions, drop me a note over at phil@killerinnovations.com. Now, the reason I've been doing this show since 2005 is to pay back my early mentor by paying it forward. My first mentor, Bob Davis, invested an immense amount of time in training and coaching me, which had a major impact on my career. When I went back and asked him how I could pay him back, he just laughed and said I couldn't. I had to pay it forward. If I could ask for a favor, could you help me pay it forward? How? 1, give us a rating wherever you get your podcasts, as that helps spread the word. And 2, by telling others about the show. This episode of Killer Innovations was produced by the Innovators Network. You can find the show notes and the entire show catalog over at killerinnovations.com. I'll talk to you next week. In the meantime, go out and change the world with your killer innovation. Bye-bye.